What's up, Fox and Fox Games? Today we're talking about the GTX 1080. Is it still good in 2020? Well, yes. The answer obviously is yes. It's still very good in 2020, but is it a 1440p 60 FPS card like it once was? This thing used to be touted as the 4K king with the 1080 Ti, and these days that moniker doesn't quite hold true anymore. Back when this first came out, 4K was actually very easy to run on a lot of the games that came out. I remember playing Rise of the Tomb Raider on 4K at 60 FPS, among many, many other demanding games, back when I had a 4K 60 monitor. However, although graphics cards seem to have stagnated with the RTX series, video games have not. And I think that that's probably the best thing that you can do as a game developer, is even if the graphics aren't there yet, making graphics better is the job of the developers, and I think that that is something that they do need to do despite the fact that graphics cards aren't there yet. And that is very much the case in these newer titles, especially in 2020, when I think a lot of these developers were anticipating the 30 series cards to get in more people's hands. Which is why you're seeing these ultra-high settings and nightmare settings and everything like that absolutely cranking these things to their limits, even the 2080 Ti to its limits, because they are not even focusing on this generation of graphics card. They're focusing on the 30 series and beyond. And I think that's wonderful. I think, again, that's the best thing you can do as a developer. With that said, the GTX 1080 once held king. It was a fantastic high-end card that, although it wasn't a 1080 Ti, which was the absolute king, was still a very, very good option for 4K or 1440p gaming. And in today's video, we are going to be talking about the 1440p experience. We're going to crank every setting on Ultra at 1440p and see if it can still run at 60 plus FPS, because when this first came out, games would demolish that frame rate. So the specific card that I have right here is the EVGA GeForce GTX 1080 FTW2. It has a base clock of 1721 MHz and a boost clock of 1860. It has a memory clock of 10,010 MHz, 2,560 CUDA cores, requires a 500 watt or greater power supply, and has 8 gigs of VRAM. What's so crazy to me is this was the first time I've ever actually seen games exceed the limit on this card of 8 gigs, which is absolutely mind-boggling. Granted, it's not by much. It's usually within like 100 megabytes, but that's still crazy to me, considering I know that most people are running 1060s, which are either 3 or 6 gig, and I think most people are probably running 4 gig cards still. However, let's hop into some benchmarks, starting off with Call of Duty Cold War, which ran interestingly. There were times on the corners of Nuketown that ran at 60 FPS in spawn areas, but as soon as you got into battle, in the middle of the map, it would drop down to 45 FPS. Sometimes it would drop down to the high 30s, sometimes it would go up to the high 50s. The problem with that is the fact that it's such a variation in frame rate that it's really honestly kind of jarring to have such a variation within your gameplay session. So although it's an average of 46, the overall performance really varied quite a lot. Watch Dogs Legion, a criminally underrated game at the moment that I am absolutely loving right now, and you should give it a try when it's at half price, ran at 36 FPS in the benchmark on average, with a 1% low of 27 FPS and a 0.1% low of 22. This was the most demanding game and the one that exceeded the VRAM cap on the Ultra settings, with 4 lights enabled on cars, which for some reason didn't even turn on when I preset the game to Ultra, so I had to manually change that, but 36 FPS was the average. I would recommend just hitting the auto detect button on this game. You'll get a good amount of Ultra, medium, and high settings with that option, and I think the game still looks pretty great, considering the worst part about the game you can change no matter what setting you have on, and that is anti-aliasing. Please give us the option for anti-aliasing above TAA. However, to show off just what this card could do back in 2016, I wanted to throw an older game in the benchmark. And that was the original Doom that came out the same year as this card. At 1440p, it was hitting up against the 144 Hz cap the entire time I was fighting. In certain maps, that does dip down, but never below 110, and it was an overall very amazing experience. Adversely, Doom Eternal ran much worse. With everything on the absolute highest settings, which I think are called Nightmare in this game, we saw an average of 84 FPS with a 1% lull of 71, so still above 60 FPS, which I consider absolutely like the baseline for AAA titles on a card like this. So it still absolutely demolished that frame rate cap, but it obviously didn't perform as well as the original Doom. And finally, Gears 5, one of the most popular games on my channel. Shout out to all the people who subscribe because of my escape maps and have stayed because of me. Gears 5 ran at 57.6 FPS on average in the benchmark. The benchmark in Gears 5, again, is not representative of actual gameplay. I would say that it's rather representative of the campaign, and it's a decent visual for the campaign. However, multiplayer maps are much more optimized for frame rate, and you should see 60 plus FPS on average, and not many dips below that. So just to let you know, the reason why you see an empty box right here is because of the fact that I didn't really want to take my GTX 1080 out of my main build right now. It's a lot of work to do, and I just wanted to get the tests done and get this video out there, let you know what's going on. So I'm sure I'll have some B-roll showing you that I actually, proof of purchase, because I do have a GTX 1080 in here. But with that said, that means that we aren't going on a 10400 as we usually are. We are actually going off of a 3900X, meaning there's absolutely no bottleneck whatsoever to the 1080. Not that the 10400 would be any sort of bottleneck. CPUs, the GTX 1080 came out with 4 cores, were still a very popular choice, and the only choice, I think, in terms of being on Intel's side. I had a 7700K with this card. But now I was running it on a 12-core 24-thread with 32 gigs of RAM, so I think we definitely gave it room to breathe. With that said, the GTX 1080, surprisingly, going off just the time that it was released, has been with me throughout high school, and I'm a college student now. It was just so crazy to me. I've had it for 4 years, and it's treated me very well. I am excited for the upgrade. I think the 3080 is going to be a fantastic upgrade, and I can't wait for that to show up. But the GTX 1080 is still an absolutely fantastic card, and I would advise completely against getting an RTX 20 series card as an upgrade from the 10 series card, because the GTX 1080 is still an absolute monster on the field. Going to a 2080 is not a whole lot of performance increase, and a 2070 Super, which I think still costs like almost $600, only performs 5% better. At least the laptop version does. So that's up to you to decide. But again, if you have a GTX 1080, why would you upgrade? Think about getting a better CPU first while these new graphics cards stay out of stock for the rest of eternity and you're never able to buy a graphics card ever again. So thank you very much for watching this video. If you like this video, like, subscribe, do what you usually do. We are so unbelievably close to 1,000 subscribers. I can't thank each and every one of you enough for everything you've done for this channel. It has been a very long road coming. For those of you who don't know, I've been doing YouTube for almost 4 years now, and I've been loving every second of it, and I love you so much. So please, if you are new to this channel, subscribe, and I promise I'll give you the best content I possibly can. And as always, buy yourself something nice.